Well, this is filmed a little sooner than anticipated, but pulled the engine last night. The video you saw with it rolling out of the shop, the clutch would not disengage, so I just put it in second gear, started it, rolled it out of the shop, and drove it around some. But the clutch would not disengage, it was stuck engaged. So I called up the machinist who machined the flywheel, and he had me bring it back over, and on the very outer edges of it, where the pressure plate mates up, there was a little raised surface. So he took that down to make it flush, and because of the taper on the pressure plate, taper on the flywheel, maybe it holding it up like that was causing it to engage further, although that's the opposite thinking of how it should be, because the deeper this pressure plate goes in, the tighter the clutch would get, because the clutch wasn't releasing. You push down, the thrust bearing pushes on this, the pressure plate surface on the other side pulls away. Right here, this pulls away, and then the clutch is free spinning. When the clutch is out, this pressure plate pushes it up against the flywheel. You can see it in here. So it pushes the disc up against the flywheel, so that's it stuck engaged when it's clamped. And this pressure plate surface moves away, and then the clutch is free and not spinning. So we'll go ahead and torque this all down evenly and get it back on and see if the clutch actually works. And then continue troubleshooting from there to do a street drive. Just put this on because I forget to turn the fuel on before cranking it. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. So put the motor back in again after the flywheel was machined more by the machinist, and it's still, the clutch would not disengage. So he recommended getting a new pressure plate to solve that problem. So you can see this T-fitting down here. This is for each fuel line, comes on each end. It's just zip tied here right now with an old fuel line that I deleted because I went with braided stainless. So we have a mount point there, a mount point there, and what just fell on the ground a second ago that you probably heard is this AN clamp. So the fuel fittings will come around and then clamp onto this aluminum tube that goes in between those two bolts. So it'll bolt on the left, bolt on the right. I'll flatten this tube out on the ends and put the bolt through here. And this will clamp and hold the AN fuel fittings, which then hold that T-junction. I'll probably buy a T later that has a mount too, but I think that'll hold it good enough. I mean, they just had zip ties. I plan to replace the fuel pump and fuel filter you see down there and run all stainless braided hose. Have it anyway, so there's downtime to do with the buggy not operating anyway. I would have had to do this stuff sooner or later, right? So other things I added, which you won't be able to see very well, but down in there, there is a shut-off switch, what you call it. Getting that interference again with the, forget which way this goes. Anyway, this is a shut-off switch. I gotta still remove some of these wires. So you can see that is with the system on, positive lead connected. That is positive lead disconnected. That way we don't have to worry about any fires. I also redid these ends, crimped on nice connectors. I have the battery coming like next week as well. So all in all, got things wrapping up other loose ends, got some lock wire and the pliers in order to actually attach the exhaust, and yeah, just kind of buttoning up little things. So hopefully eventually, obviously, we'll be doing a street ride and stuff. Also out of the fire extinguisher. I gotta get an actual red one, but that's a automotive one. I happen to be white. So update on the fueling system. She comes around. I have a couple more of these clamps anyway, but not that it needs it. So you can see there's obviously the main line here that's loose that comes off the fuel pump. Both tanks feed into a T right here. This will all be stainless braided line eventually as well. Naturally, I was just trying to get it running first, but we're waiting for a clutch now anyway. So we're waiting for a pressure plate really, so I'll rotate that so it'll be towards the bottom. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Said the gist of it probably 1,000 times in this video. So that is the mount to hold the T-fitting for now. Anyway, better than they had, which was zip ties. So, yeah, that's pretty much the stuff. I did have another little side project, which is lapsing my mind right now, but I'll think of it in a second. I bought some actual hose clamps for that instead of zip ties. So to make this little tube work, I just used these mounting bolts and flattened out the ends with a heated up with a torch, and just flattened out the ends. I'm going to get a nut to go in between those two, that way it'll hold these. But when I tightened it down anyway, it locked it in. But probably better to have it actually permanently locked. This tubing's purpose was actually to act as a spacer. It's going to be hard to see. This side's all busted up. You can see the parking brake cable wasn't long enough, probably because of these aftermarket trailing arms that don't look like they were off a bug. So I'm going to use these tube spacers, which that step down you see right before the cable, it fits. As you can see, they had busted up the entry point right here, and they hammered it over because they weren't planning on reusing it because it didn't have a parking brake, because it's a dune buggy. But I'm adding what I'm going to use it as is an emergency brake. So we'll use that as the spacer. You can see this one's cable is out further because I was measuring the diameter of this step down, which should fit in this tube. Yeah, well, that may never come out again. Sorry. Well, that'll be fun. I won't film that. Side note, I may make a mount for the front of the razor, because I have a razor too. That way, if the razor breaks down, I could tow it with this buggy, and vice versa. Make it utilitarian, if you will. So yeah. So that's where we're at now, waiting for that pressure plate. Should be here in a day or two, and obviously there's other loose ends. Still have to do that parking brake portion as well, so yeah. So we're waiting for the engine? Clutch? The clutch? I just mounted a piece of C-channel there, and then there's bolts behind this that hold it for the pipe, because it already had holes here, and there was 2 more holes down there. So figured, just, this might not be permanent, but it's kind of like more of a hidden mount, I suppose. So yeah, I'll show you what my other proposition is. So like I said, that's just to drive it on the road, what we just saw up there. The other option was to shape it to the fuel tank shape, and then hold it, mount it on there. Then that'd be up out of the way. So I don't know, we'll see what it looks like. Maybe comment below. All 5 subscribers. Just set the rear frame on there. I have the license plate there currently. Like I said, I might move it up onto the tank. I honestly think it might fit better on the tank. I just wanted it on there now to get it legal, so to speak. So if the clutch is ever unstuck, we could actually take it out on the road. They had this bungee on, so I've just left that for now because it works. We have a fire starter in here. So this is the AGM battery. I would tip it up, but I'd rather not. So basically, that's it. It's like 680 cranking amps. Warm cranking amps? Room temp cranking amps? Then it's like 300 cold. But the original Porche battery it calls for is like 400, and this is not going to be driven in the winter. So it has a GM work light, which if you got a GM, you're going to be working on it, so the dealer would, GM would put those under the truck hood. That way you could work on it. So hopefully we never have to use that on the buggy. That actually doesn't work right now anyway. So yeah, the new pressure plate will be here Monday, I think. And we'll install that and see if that works. So, yeah. Okay, hopefully going to be putting the engine back in for the last time for a little while. Finally got the clutch to disengage. So basically, luckily I had not out of necessity, I suppose, but I got double parts because I had another flywheel I was going to try to get the clutch to disengage. So basically this surface here is where the pressure plate sits. Here's the mounting points. So pressure plate sits on this flange, and there's a spec for how deep this surface should be. That's what the clutch rides on, the deck height of the flywheel. So my flywheel was machined on that surface to get it back within spec that the guy's been using like 30 years, but then my clutch would not disengage. So I bought a new pressure plate, still wouldn't disengage. And the lever there is stroked out fully. So basically, he gave me this flywheel, which is actually even deeper, so the clutch would be looser. Because basically, if you machine this step too far, the clutch, our pressure plate, would go down further, and it would clamp this clutch up. Because when this thrust bearing gets pushed by the throwout bearing, so this actuates, pushes backwards, pushes on this thrust bearing, and then the fingers get pushed in, and this plate moves that way to unclamp the clutch for when you push your clutch in. So that wasn't able to happen because it didn't have enough stroke. So what I wound up doing is I could have put this other flywheel on, then I'd have to mess around with my end play and everything that we set with the crankshaft and this flywheel earlier. So I actually just put some 20 thou shims underneath there, so there's a hole drilled in the center of the shim. The shim spans the entire gap, the entire mounting surface. As you can see, it's right here. It's only like an inch long. So after shimming that 25 thou on obviously every mounting point, the clutch now disengages. So we'll put it all back together and go do some test drives. Yep. Also, side note, this is not an ideal situation. This is because that step was machined. So the pressure plate clamps the clutch up too much, and there's no way to add material back to this face. So this flywheel's garbage. But because we put the shims underneath here, we salvaged it. So, yeah, it's not an ideal situation. Nobody's saying that. But it's so I can use my own flywheel anyway. Got the engine back in, mostly everything hooked up. I do have to adjust the timing. I had set it to what the book said, but my engine builder guys said to do 2,500 RPM and like 31 degrees advance of timing, so I'm going to do that. Before that, though, it's been running a little funky here and there, so when I originally took all the engine apart, I found two main jets underneath the tin here. So who knows if, the person rebuilding the carbs may not have been the smartest. So I'm taking both carbs off, as you see, and I'm going to rebuild those, then start it tomorrow, check the timing, test drive it with the shimmed clutch and everything. It's currently still disengaging fine. I started it up last night. And yeah, that's where we're at. Got the carbs apart, put them in an ultrasonic cleaner, and let them vibrate all around. And just going to be reassembling. Not that many pieces in this carb, but these main jets are pretty cool looking. They're two-piece. So basically, a lot less complicated than a jet ski carburetor, that's for sure, because the jet ski carbs have like a diaphragm pump. And they as well. Blondie! She's too busy with her little stick. Anyway, so we're just together after cleaning. Try to set the adjustment correctly, and obviously check the spark plugs. Wish me luck. Not much of a surprise, I suppose. I started in on the second carb, and I pulled out this idle fuel. I think it's actually the fuel mixture one. There's obviously like 20 different ones on this, so you can see this is how it should look, well, except the corrosion. This one has an extra prod on the end. That's actually, you might be able to see, probably kind of a big hole there now. You probably can't see because the hole is so tiny, because it's supposed to be a tiny hole like in the end of this, because this little base came out of that hole because they tightened this screw in so tight that it pulled this out of the seat that it was in. So I'll have to reinstall that back in this hole. So yeah, that definitely couldn't have been, might have been why I was running weird. At least on one cylinder. Anyway. Got her all back together. I've been test riding it. Put the mirror in. It's like a UTV mirror, but it's nice and wide. You don't even need side mirrors. Got walkie-talkies for communication and earmuffs for these super swampers. Went ahead and used brass wing nuts. They're like $1 each. Got it all back together. Readjusted the timing. I want to say 31 degrees advance at 2,500 RPM. So it's all back together now, and I've just been test driving it. I just took it for a little spin, and then I'm going to pull the plugs and check them, see if she's running lean. That's where we're at. Put a fire extinguisher on. It's got a quick release here, so you could quickly release it and obviously use it. So I'm probably going to peel the sticker off it because it looks weird with the sticker. So that's where we're at. I'm just going to lock wire the exhaust pieces properly, and that's a wrap for now. I'll film a riding video later.